She wasn't supposed to be in my life. I knew the moment I saw her eyes, sharp, dangerous, and yet unbearably soft, that I was stepping into a world I couldn't escape. They called her a thief, a liar, a woman who stole more than just money. But when she leaned closer, when her lips brushed my ear and her voice broke into a whisper that promised both fire and ruin, I didn't feel fear. I felt alive. And maybe, for the first time in my life, I wanted to lose everything just to know what it felt like to belong to her. I never believed one person could change the entire rhythm of my breathing, but that night she did. It started with the sound of her footsteps in the dimly lit corner of the bar where the music was too loud, and the people were too distracted to notice a stranger slip into my world. She carried herself with a confidence that belonged to someone who had nothing left to fear, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. The leather jacket clung to her shoulders like it had been stitched by danger itself, her gaze sharp enough to strip anyone bare. But when those same eyes landed on me, they didn't feel like knives, they felt like fire, and for a moment I forgot I was supposed to be afraid. The stories about her had already found their way through whispers in the city. They called her the $1 million thief, the woman who had slipped through law enforcement's fingers more times than anyone could count, someone who could steal not only fortunes but trust, dignity, even hearts. People spoke her name like it was a warning. But warnings rarely stop the lonely, and I had been lonely for so long that even a flame looked like salvation. She ordered a drink without looking at the bartender, her attention fixed entirely on me, as though she had walked into the bar for no other reason. Her lips curved into a smile that wasn't quite soft but wasn't cruel either. It was a smile that promised something, though I couldn't decide if that something would save me or destroy me. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, the kind of voice that slipped under your skin and stayed there. "I've seen you before," she said, though I knew she hadn't. I wanted to ask her why she was lying, but the words tangled in my throat because a part of me wanted to believe her. Maybe she had seen me, not here, not in flesh, but somewhere deeper, in the way a soul recognizes another soul even before the mind does. I managed to answer, but my voice betrayed my nerves. "I don't think you have." She leaned closer, just enough for me to catch the faint scent of smoke and something sweeter I couldn't name, like a memory I didn't own. "No," she said, almost teasing, "I have. I don't forget faces." My pulse raced, not because of her words but because of how certain she was, as though she had already decided I belonged in her world, whether I wanted to or not. The bar was crowded, yet it felt like the two of us existed in a glass bubble no one could see through. Every other sound dulled, every other presence faded, and all I could feel was the heat radiating from her body as she studied me like I was the only thing worth paying attention to. I should have walked away. Every rational thought screamed at me to leave, to put distance between myself and this woman whose reputation preceded her. But loneliness makes traitors of us all. When she tilted her head and asked if I wanted to take a walk, I found myself nodding before my conscience had time to protest. Outside, the night air was cold, sharp against my skin, but standing beside her made everything warmer. She didn't walk like someone avoiding attention, she walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet. People glanced our way, some in recognition, some in fear, but she didn't care. It was as though she had long stopped living for the judgment of others. I envied that freedom, the way she carried her sins like armor instead of chains. After a stretch of silence, she finally turned to me with that same almost smile. "You know who I am, don't you?" I hesitated, but lying felt useless. "Yes." She laughed softly, not mocking, but as if my honesty amused her. "And you're still here." She let the words hang between us, heavy, daring me to deny what we both knew. I should have said I was leaving, that this was a mistake, but instead I whispered, "Yes." For a brief moment, her face softened, the edges of her strength bending into something fragile, almost tender. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the same dangerous confidence, but I had seen it, and it left me hungrier than before. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just a thief of money or treasures. She was a thief of resolve, of hesitation, of anything that kept a person from falling headfirst into her orbit. And I was already falling. She stopped in front of a quiet alleyway, leaning against the wall as though it were her throne. The glow of a nearby street lamp cast shadows across her face, making her look both unreal and achingly human. "There are things about me you don't want to know," she murmured, her gaze steady on mine. "But if you stay, I won't protect you from them." I swallowed hard, my heart aching against my ribs, because I knew she was giving me one last chance to turn around. Yet everything inside me whispered the same truth: I didn't want protection. I wanted her. She studied me as though weighing the pieces of my soul, and then, with a voice that curled into my chest like smoke, she added, "One day, I'll show you my world. It's not beautiful, but it's mine." The promise lingered between us, dangerous and irresistible. She pushed off the wall and started walking again, not asking me to follow but knowing I would. My steps echoed hers, and in that moment, I understood something terrifying and wonderful. I wasn't just walking beside her. I was already hers, claimed by nothing more than a glance, a whisper, and a smile that tasted like sin and salvation combined. And deep down, I knew I didn't want to be free. She was not someone who explained herself easily, but I learned quickly that silence with her was never empty. Every pause carried weight, every glance carried meaning. The next time I saw her was not by accident. It was late, the kind of late where the streets are deserted except for shadows and regrets, and I found myself standing outside a small cafe that had long closed for the night. She was already there, leaning against the glass window as though she had been waiting for me. Her arms were crossed, her eyes glinting in the glow of a flickering streetlight, and the second I saw her, my heart stuttered like it had been caught off guard. She smirked, tilting her head in that knowing way. "You came," she said, like she had never doubted it. And she was right, I had come, without thinking twice, without asking myself why. Something about her drew me like gravity, and even though every instinct told me to run, I couldn't break free. She gestured for me to walk with her, and just like before, my feet moved before my mind caught up. We walked in silence for a while, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath our steps. I wanted to ask her questions, 1,000 of them, but I didn't know where to begin. It was she who finally broke the silence. "Do you know what people say about me?" she asked, her voice carrying the edge of a dare. I nodded, unsure if admitting it would push her away. "They say you're dangerous." She smiled at that, but it wasn't pride, it was something sadder. Something that told me she had long stopped caring what names people gave her. "They say I'm a thief," she corrected, her gaze fixed straight ahead. "And they're right. But they never ask why." The word why hung heavy in the night air, like a door she had cracked open but wasn't sure if she wanted me to walk through. My curiosity overpowered my hesitation. "Then why?" I asked softly. She stopped walking, turned toward me, and for the first time, I saw the shadow of a wound in her eyes, something old and unhealed. "Because when the world takes everything from you, you learn to take back what you can," she whispered. I didn't wake up one day and decide I wanted to live like this. Life decided it for me. Her voice trembled, but only slightly, the kind of tremor you'd miss if you weren't listening closely. In that moment, the mask slipped, and beneath the image of the untouchable thief was a woman carrying scars too deep for most to see. She looked away quickly, as though she had shown me too much, but I couldn't unsee it. Something inside me cracked open, a tenderness I didn't know I was capable of. "You don't have to tell me everything," I said gently, "but you don't have to carry it alone either." She laughed softly, a laugh without joy, and shook her head. "People like me don't get saved. We just survive." The words should have made me step back, but instead they pulled me closer. I realized then that what drew me to her wasn't just her danger, or her allure, it was the way she wore her pain like a second skin, refusing to let it break her even though it had already shaped her. And something in me wanted to touch that pain, to understand it, to hold it for her even if only for a moment. We sat on the edge of a concrete step, the night pressing around us, and she told me fragments of her story in pieces that felt almost accidental. A father who left when she was young. A mother who worked herself to exhaustion but could never escape poverty. A love she once had, lost to betrayal so deep it turned her heart into stone. Each piece came out clipped, unfinished, as though saying too much might unravel her. But even the fragments were enough to paint a picture of a life carved by loss. And as she spoke, I saw not a thief, not a criminal, but a woman who had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. When she finished, she looked at me as though expecting judgment, maybe even fear. Instead, I whispered, "You didn't deserve any of that." For a second, her expression softened again, that same fragile tenderness I had glimpsed before. She searched my face as though trying to decide whether I was naive or genuine, and whatever she found there made her exhale slowly, almost in relief. "You're dangerous too," she said quietly, surprising me. I frowned. "Me? Why?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Because you believe me." That single sentence wrapped around my heart like a chain. I didn't know if it was a warning or a confession, but I felt it sink deep, tying me to her in a way I couldn't undo. She leaned in closer then, so close that her breath brushed against my cheek, her voice dropping to a whisper. "One day, I'll show you everything. But if you step into that world, you'll never be able to step out again." My chest tightened, every nerve alight with fear and longing. I should have walked away then, should have cut whatever thread was tying me to this woman. But instead, I nodded, barely breathing, and whispered, "Show me." Her eyes lingered on mine, searching for hesitation, and when she found none, she reached out and let her fingers graze my hand. The touch was fleeting, almost accidental, but it burned like a promise. And in that moment, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't return from. The days that followed felt like walking on the edge of a knife. Every part of me knew I was getting too close to a woman the world called untouchable, but the pull was stronger than my fear. She was in my thoughts when I tried to sleep, in the rhythm of my pulse when I woke up, and even in the quiet moments of my day when I caught myself imagining her voice saying my name. I knew she was dangerous, but the truth is, she made me feel more alive than I had in years. I wasn't just curious about her world anymore, I was hungry for it, for her. The next time we met, it was in a place that wasn't crowded, wasn't loud, wasn't safe in any sense of the word. She chose an abandoned stretch of street lined with shuttered warehouses, the kind of place most people avoided even in daylight. I almost turned back, but there she was, leaning against the hood of a car as though she had been waiting, her posture as casual as if the entire world belonged to her. She smiled when she saw me, not wide, not warm, but slow and deliberate, and it made my chest ache. "You're braver than I thought," she said, her voice carrying that low hum of amusement that both disarmed and unsettled me. "Or maybe just reckless." I tried to answer, but words always seemed too small in her presence. She didn't wait for my reply. Instead, she moved closer, her eyes locked on mine in a way that left me feeling exposed. "Do you know what happens to people who stand too close to me?" she asked. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it was sharp, designed to warn me away. "They burn." My heart hammered so hard I thought she could hear it, but I forced myself to whisper, "Then let me burn." For the first time, she looked at me not with that polished confidence she wore like armor, but with something raw, something caught between disbelief and desire. Her lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then she laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You don't even know what you're asking for." But I did, at least in some way. I wasn't asking for safety. I wasn't asking for normal. I was asking for her, with all her shadows and scars and sins. That night, she let me closer than she had before. We sat on the hood of her car, the night pressing down on us, and she told me about the way she had been betrayed by someone she once loved. She didn't give names, didn't give dates, but the way her voice broke on certain words told me enough. She had been young, foolish, and trusting, and she had given everything to someone who had sold her out for money and power. That was the night I stopped believing in forever, she murmured, staring at the sky as though the stars held answers. Love, loyalty, promises, they all break. People will do anything to survive. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I hesitated, afraid of breaking the fragile thread of honesty she was offering me. But you're still here, I said softly. You didn't let it destroy you. Her eyes turned toward me then, and for a moment I thought I saw gratitude flicker there. No, she said quietly, I let it build me. The weight of those words pressed deep into me. She wasn't just a thief of money, she was a thief of her own destiny, stealing pieces of a life that had been denied to her. She had rebuilt herself from ashes, and though the world saw her as dangerous, I saw her as someone who had survived what should have broken her. It was then she leaned closer, her breath brushing against my cheek, her lips only inches from mine. Do you know what happens when you touch fire? She whispered. I didn't flinch, didn't pull back. It hurts, I whispered back. But it's worth it. That was the first time her lips brushed mine, not fully, not enough to call it a kiss, but enough to leave me trembling, enough to brand me with the truth that I belonged to her now, whether she wanted me or not. She pulled back just as quickly, her eyes searching mine with a mixture of hunger and hesitation. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she stood, straightened her jacket, and said, There's a place I want to show you. Not tonight. Not yet. But soon. I knew she meant the storage unit, the place she had hinted at before, the place where her secrets lived. The way she said it made my skin prickle with both anticipation and fear. She wasn't just inviting me into a building, she was inviting me into her soul, into the part of her life no one else was allowed to touch. Why me? I asked before I could stop myself. She paused, her back turned to me, then glanced over her shoulder with that slow, devastating smile. Because you don't run. And that was the truth. No matter how close I got to the fire, no matter how many times she warned me to leave, I couldn't run. I was already burning, and I wanted more. When we parted that night, I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in my head, her half-kiss haunted my lips, and the promise of that mysterious place consumed my thoughts. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing I was in too deep but no longer caring. She was dangerous, yes. But she was also a kind of salvation, and I knew I would follow her into the dark without hesitation. The night she finally led me to the place she had whispered about felt heavier than any night before. The city was quiet in a way that made every sound sharper, the echo of our footsteps on the cracked pavement, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a stray dog somewhere in the distance. She walked ahead of me with her hands in her jacket pockets, her shoulders squared, her stride steady, and though she didn't look back, I knew she was aware of every step I took behind her. I felt like I was being pulled deeper into her gravity, into a part of her life that no one else was ever meant to see, and the thought made my chest tighten with both fear and anticipation. We turned down a street where the lights flickered weakly, and at the end of it stood a row of storage units, each one locked and silent like tombs. She stopped in front of one, her hand brushing over the metal door as if it were alive. For a moment she didn't move, and I watched her face change in the dim light. The usual sharp confidence slipped away, and for the first time I saw hesitation in her eyes, as though she was questioning whether I deserved this part of her. Then, almost too softly to hear, she said, If you walk in here, there's no going back. My throat felt dry, but I managed to whisper, I already crossed that line the moment I met you. She looked at me for a long time, searching, weighing, and then she pulled out a key. The sound of the lock snapping open seemed louder than the silence around us. With one hard pull, the metal door rattled upward, revealing darkness so complete it felt like stepping into another world. She motioned for me to follow, and I did, my heart thundering as I stepped inside. The air was cooler, carrying a faint smell of dust and something sharper, maybe metal, maybe memory. She flicked on a single hanging bulb, and the space filled with a dim yellow glow. What I saw made me forget to breathe. The unit wasn't filled with stolen jewels or stacks of cash like I had imagined. Instead, it was crowded with boxes, notebooks, faded photographs, and objects that seemed random but carried stories only she knew. A guitar with one broken string leaned against the wall. A child-stuffed rabbit, worn from years of being held, sat on a shelf beside a stack of old books. And in the corner, in a battered metal trunk, there were bundles of cash, crisp, bound, unmistakable. The $1 million secret, I thought, but somehow the money felt like the least important thing in the room. My eyes kept going back to the personal items, the fragments of a life she had hidden away here, pieces of her past that she couldn't let go of. She stood in the center of it all, watching me carefully, her arms crossed as if bracing herself. "This is me," she said finally, her voice steady but low. "Not the woman you hear about in whispers, not the name the world spits out like venom. This is who I really am. Every mistake, every loss, every piece of me I couldn't bury, it's here." I turned slowly, taking it all in, and felt the weight of her trust pressing against my chest. She hadn't just brought me to her hiding place. She had brought me into her heart. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked softly, afraid my voice might break the fragile honesty in the room. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because you make me forget I'm supposed to be untouchable," she whispered. "And that terrifies me more than anything else." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing my wrist, light as a ghost. The touch was hesitant, almost trembling, and it broke something inside me. Without thinking, I closed the space between us, my hand sliding over hers, anchoring us both. She inhaled sharply, and her eyes softened in a way I had never seen before. "I've kept everyone at a distance," she said, her voice breaking. "They see what I want them to see. But you look at me like I'm still human." My chest ached at her words. "You are," I whispered, the truth spilling from me like it had been waiting all along. "You're the most human person I've ever known." Her lips parted, her breath uneven, and I knew she was fighting herself. Then, like surrender, she leaned closer until her forehead rested against mine. The world outside didn't exist. There was only her scent, her trembling hands, the warmth of her breath mingling with mine. When she finally kissed me, it wasn't fire or destruction like she had warned, it was something deeper, something fragile and desperate. It was a kiss that carried both confession and apology, hunger and fear. I melted into it, every nerve alive, every piece of me surrendering. When she pulled back, her eyes glistened with something she tried to hide. "You don't know what you're getting into," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I can't stop wanting you." My heart thundered, but I didn't hesitate. "Then don't stop." She closed her eyes, pressing her lips to my temple, holding me like she was afraid I might disappear. Around us, the storage unit seemed to hum with secrets and ghosts, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that for the first time, she had let someone in. And I was the one standing there, wrapped in her trust, tangled in her danger, drowning in a love I couldn't escape. The kiss in that storage unit didn't end with our lips parting, it lingered in the space between us like smoke that refused to fade. For days afterward, I carried the taste of her with me everywhere I went, and it made ordinary life feel hollow. She had opened a door that could never be shut again, and I wasn't sure if I was walking toward freedom or a cage. All I knew was that she had become the axis around which my entire world spun. Each meeting after that night felt heavier, loaded with tension we could no longer pretend didn't exist. She wasn't just the thief with a reputation whispered in fear, she was a woman unraveling in front of me, and I was unraveling with her. When I saw her again, she was sitting in the storage unit with the door half closed, a cigarette burning between her fingers. The smoke curled around her like a shield, but the look in her eyes was raw. "Do you ever regret finding me?" she asked, without preamble. Her voice was steady, but I caught the smallest crack beneath it, as though she already feared the answer. I sat beside her on the cold concrete floor, close enough for our shoulders to touch. No, I said simply, because it was the truth. Not even for a second. She gave a soft, humorless laugh. You should. I'll only ruin you. But I shook my head, refusing to let her rewrite the truth. You've made me feel alive in a way I didn't know was possible. If that's ruin, then I want it. She looked at me then, really looked, as though she was searching for the lie in my words. When she found none, she sighed and exhaled smoke, her shoulders dropping in something that almost resembled surrender. That night, she began to tell me more. Not just fragments, but whole pieces of her story, like she couldn't hold them in anymore. She spoke of the first time she stole, not for thrill or greed, but for survival. She had been hungry, her mother sick, and no one cared enough to help. She stole bread from a store, and the shame of being caught had burned her, but the relief of feeding her mother had burned brighter. From there, survival had hardened into habit, habit into necessity, necessity into reputation. The $1 million wasn't just money, it was her proof that she had taken control of a world that had always tried to crush her. But beneath the pride, I heard the loneliness. Each word she spoke felt like a confession, and every confession cut deeper into me. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to justify herself, but I knew she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was giving me a map to her soul, and I followed it willingly. At some point, she stubbed out the cigarette and leaned her head back against the wall, her eyes closing. I turned to study her face in the dim light, the sharp line of her jaw, the shadows beneath her eyes, the curve of her lips that looked too fragile for the weight of her story. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. She tensed at first, but then she let her fingers lace with mine, and the silence between us became intimate, not heavy. You scare me, she whispered suddenly. The word startled me. Why? I asked softly. She opened her eyes, turning her head to face me. Because you see me. Everyone else sees the thief, the name in the papers, the woman who doesn't care. But you look at me like I'm more than that. And I don't know how to live up to it. My chest ached at her vulnerability. I squeezed her hand gently, grounding her. You don't have to live up to anything. Just let me stay. Her eyes glistened as though she was holding back something unspoken, but instead of words, she kissed me. This time, there was no hesitation, no trembling. Her lips pressed against mine with urgency, with need, with a hunger that shook me to my core. Her hand cupped my cheek, and I could feel the shiver in her touch, the way desire tangled with fear. I kissed her back, pouring everything I couldn't say into that moment, everything I wanted her to know, that she was wanted, that she was seen, that she was loved even if she couldn't name it yet. When we broke apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against mine, whispering, "You're going to destroy me." "Or save you," I whispered back, though even as I said it, I knew the line between destruction and salvation was so thin it was almost invisible. From that night on, our connection deepened into something neither of us could deny. We spent hours together in the storage unit, not always speaking, sometimes just sitting in silence, our hands brushing, our bodies leaning into each other. It became our sanctuary, a place where the rest of the world couldn't reach us. But the deeper I stepped into her world, the more I began to feel the shadows pressing in. There were phone calls she wouldn't answer when I was there, sudden flashes of anger she tried to hide, moments when her eyes darted toward the door as if expecting someone to break it down. The $1 million wasn't just a prize, it was a weight dragging her down, and now it was dragging me too. And yet, I couldn't leave. I didn't want to. I was addicted to her voice, her touch, the rare moments when her armor cracked and I saw the woman beneath the legend. Even when she was silent, even when her mind seemed far away, I stayed. One night, she broke the quiet with a whisper that chilled me. "If I asked you to run away with me, would you?" I turned to her, my heart hammering. "Yes." She smiled faintly, but there was sadness in her eyes. "You don't even know where I'd take you." I shook my head. "I don't care. As long as I'm with you." She kissed me then, harder than before, almost desperate, as though testing whether my words were real. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Don't promise me things you can't keep." "I'm not promising," I said firmly. "I'm choosing." She stared at me for a long time, and in her eyes I saw both fear and longing. She wanted to believe me, and that terrified her. That night, when she held me close, I realized something with startling clarity. I wasn't just falling in love with her. I already had. The night she finally told me the truth felt different from every other night we had shared. There was no smirk on her lips, no teasing edge in her voice, no sharp shield of confidence to push me back when I came too close. She looked tired, like she was carrying the weight of years in her chest and it had finally become too heavy to bear alone. We sat in the storage unit, the dim bulb above us casting long shadows on the walls, and I could feel the silence pressing down on her like a storm that had been waiting too long to break. She sat across from me, her knees drawn up, a cigarette burning low between her fingers, and her eyes staring at the floor as though it held her entire history. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, steady, but filled with an ache that made my stomach twist. "Do you know what $1 million really is?" she asked. I shook my head slowly, afraid to interrupt. "It's not freedom," she said bitterly. "It's not power. It's blood. Every dollar in that trunk cost me something I can never get back." She crushed the cigarette against the concrete, her hand trembling ever so slightly, then lifted her gaze to mine. Her eyes were glassy, but sharp, as though daring me to flinch. "I didn't steal all of it for myself. Half of it was supposed to belong to someone else." The words hung heavy, and I could feel the shift in the air, the way she was pulling me deeper into a part of her life she had kept locked away from everyone. She leaned back against the wall, her voice dropping lower. "There was a woman once. Her name was Elena. She was everything I wasn't, soft, kind, believing in things like honesty and forever. And somehow, she chose me. She saw something in me worth saving, and I wanted to believe her. For the first time in my life, I wanted to be more than a survivor. I wanted to be hers." I felt my chest tighten, jealousy flickering in me even though I knew this wasn't about rivalry. This was about the wound she had never allowed to heal. "We made a plan," she continued. "One last job. Enough to get out, enough to start fresh somewhere no one could touch us. $1 million, split between us. We swore it was just survival. We swore it was love." Her lips curved in a bitter smile. "But survival makes liars of everyone." The night we pulled it off, when the money was finally in our hands, she turned on me. She had already cut a deal with the same people we stole from. She handed me over like I was nothing but a pawn, thinking she'd walk away with the cash and her freedom. Her voice cracked then, just slightly, and she pressed her fingers against her eyes as if to hide the memory. But it didn't go the way she planned. They took her too. I never saw her again. I don't know if she's dead, or if she's out there somewhere, but either way, she's gone. And I've been running ever since, carrying the weight of her betrayal and my survival. My breath caught as her words sank into me. I could picture it too vividly, the woman she had loved, the betrayal, the blood-stained price of every dollar sitting in that trunk. I wanted to reach out, to erase the memory from her mind, but I knew I couldn't. It was carved into her, a scar too deep to fade. "So when people call me the $1 million thief," she whispered, "I let them. I let them think I'm greedy, selfish, ruthless. Because the truth is worse. The truth is, I loved someone so much I let myself believe in forever, and she destroyed me. The money is just the reminder." Her eyes met mine then, and for the first time, I saw fear in her, not of the law, not of enemies, but of me. Of what I might do with the truth she had just handed me. "Now you know," she said quietly. "This is what I am. This is what you're choosing if you stay." My throat tightened as I tried to find words. I could have walked away in that moment, told her that her world was too dark, that her past was too heavy. But instead, I crawled across the floor until I was kneeling in front of her. I took her face in my hands, forcing her to see me. "You are not what she did to you," I said firmly. "You are not the betrayal, or the pain, or the scars. You are the woman who survived it. You are the woman who still knows how to love, even when it terrifies you." Her lips trembled, and for a moment she looked like she might break. Then she grabbed my wrists, holding on so tightly it almost hurt. "Why won't you run?" she demanded, her voice raw. "Why can't you see how dangerous this is?" Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let go. "Because you're worth it," I whispered. "Because somewhere in all this, you're still the woman who deserves to be loved. And I can't unsee her." The silence that followed was thick with emotion, broken only by the sound of our breathing. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to mine, and I felt the shudder in her body as though she was fighting against years of walls collapsing all at once. When she kissed me this time, it wasn't desperate or hungry. It was soft, trembling, almost reverent, like she was afraid I might disappear if she held on too tightly. I kissed her back, pouring every ounce of love and defiance into it, silently promising her that I wasn't leaving, not now, not ever. When we finally pulled apart, she closed her eyes and whispered, "If I let you stay, you'll be part of this forever. You'll be marked, just like me." I stroked her cheek gently, brushing away a tear that had slipped free. "Then mark me," I whispered. "I don't care what it costs." She stared at me as though she couldn't believe I existed, and in that moment, something in her broke open. She wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder, and for the first time since I had met her, I heard her cry. The sound was quiet, muffled, but it shook me to my core. I held her tightly, whispering that she wasn't alone, that she didn't have to keep carrying the burden by herself. And as we sat there, surrounded by shadows and secrets and a trunk filled with blood-stained money, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I was hers, in every way that mattered, and no betrayal or danger could take that from me. The days after her confession felt strangely different, like the air itself had changed. Every time we were together, there was a weight pressing down, not from us but from the world beyond those thin walls. The storage unit had once felt like a secret haven, but now I could feel eyes on us even when no one was around. The thief I had once seen as untouchable now carried herself with a restlessness I hadn't noticed before. She was sharper, watching shadows, pausing at every sound, scanning every street when we walked. And yet, with me, she softened in ways that scared her. She would kiss me with urgency, hold me as though time was running out, whisper in my ear at night like every word was both a prayer and a goodbye. I tried to believe it was just paranoia, but deep down I knew something was shifting. It started with small things, a car parked in the same spot 2 nights in a row, a stranger at the corner who seemed to linger too long, muffled knocks in the middle of the night that we never answered. She brushed them off, pretending it was nothing, but her eyes told me otherwise. One evening, when we were in the storage unit and she was counting the money, she froze mid-motion. I asked her what was wrong, and she said quietly, "They're close." My chest tightened. "Who?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. She shut the trunk, locked it, and looked at me with that fierce, protective fire in her eyes. "People who don't forget. People who don't forgive." For the first time, I saw fear in her, not for herself, but for me. That night, she insisted we leave the unit separately, telling me to go first and walk straight home without looking back. I hated the way her voice shook when she said it, but I obeyed, my heart pounding the entire way. The streets felt darker than usual, like the night itself was closing in on me. When I got home, she wasn't there yet. Hours passed before she finally returned, her clothes damp from rain, her hair clinging to her face, and her hands trembling as she locked the door behind her. She didn't say where she had been, but the look in her eyes told me everything. She had seen them. They were here. The next days bled into one another, tension thick enough to choke on. We couldn't pretend anymore. Every step we took was careful, deliberate. She barely slept, sitting awake with a knife in her lap, her gaze fixed on the door. And yet, in the middle of that storm, our love grew fiercer. Every kiss tasted like a question, what if this is the last one? Every touch felt like a desperate promise to hold on, even if the world tore us apart. She would whisper against my skin, "I can't lose you," and I would whisper back, "Then don't." But fear crept into me, not fear of the danger, but of losing her. One night, I asked her if it was worth it, if the money, the secrets, the running were worth the price we were paying. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then finally said, "It was never about the money. It was about surviving. But you make me want more than just survival. You make me want to live." My heart broke at her words because I knew how hard it was for her to admit that. She had built her entire life on running, fighting, surviving, and here she was, daring to dream of something else, something fragile, something as reckless as love. But love is not safe, and the universe has a cruel way of testing it. A few days later, it happened. We were at the storage unit, sorting through the cash, when she suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me down. A sound echoed outside, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps, too heavy, too close. My heart stopped. She put a finger to her lips, her other hand already reaching for the knife she kept strapped to her boot. We waited in silence, every breath loud in my ears. The footsteps grew louder, then paused right outside the metal door. I could see the shadow of movement under the crack. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. She leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. "If they come in, run," she whispered. I shook my head furiously, tears burning my eyes. "I'm not leaving you," I mouthed back. Her eyes softened with something that looked like both love and despair. For a moment, I thought she might argue, but she only pressed her forehead to mine briefly, as though memorizing me. Then the door rattled. My stomach flipped. We held our breath, the silence so sharp it felt like glass. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the footsteps moved away. The shadow disappeared. The night swallowed the sound. We didn't move for what felt like hours, both of us frozen, clinging to the moment as the letting go would shatter it. Finally, she exhaled, her body trembling against mine. "They know," she whispered. "They know where we are." In that instant, I realized what she had been trying to protect me from. This wasn't just her fight anymore, it was mine too. The storage unit was no longer a secret, no longer a sanctuary. It was a target, and by loving her, I had stepped right into the crosshairs. I wanted to tell her I was ready, that I wasn't afraid, but the words caught in my throat. Because I wasn't ready. I was terrified. Terrified of losing her, terrified of the world crashing down on us. But when she looked at me, her eyes blazing with determination, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: I would rather face the danger by her side than live a safe life without her. And as she pulled me into her arms, whispering that we would find a way, I held her tighter than ever, silently vowing that no matter what came next, I wasn't going anywhere. The night the storm finally broke was nothing like I imagined. There was no warning, no time to prepare, no moment to gather our strength. It came all at once, fast and merciless, tearing through the fragile world we had built together. We were in the storage unit again, the air heavy with the scent of dust and metal, the dim bulb swaying slightly above us. She was restless, pacing back and forth, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds as though she already knew it was the last night we'd ever stand there. I sat on one of the boxes, my arms wrapped around myself, trying to swallow the fear clawing up my throat. I wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but the lie stuck in my chest. She stopped suddenly, turned to me, and in her gaze I saw both fire and surrender. "If something happens tonight, promise me you'll run," she said, her voice low but sharp, like steel cloaked in velvet. My whole body shook. "I can't promise that. I won't leave you." She crossed the space between us in 2 strides, grabbing my face with trembling hands, her forehead pressed hard against mine. Her breath was unsteady, her voice breaking as she whispered, "You don't understand. They're not after you. They want me. If you stay, they'll take you too. I can't let that happen." Tears stung my eyes, hot and bitter. "Then don't make me live without you," I begged, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Her lips pressed to mine in a kiss so fierce it tasted like desperation. It was a kiss filled with fear, regret, love, and the weight of unspoken goodbyes. Before I could say anything more, the sound came, boots pounding against the pavement outside, the sharp crunch of gravel, the sudden slam of a vehicle door. My blood ran cold. She pulled away, her eyes flashing with determination. "It's time." The next moments felt like a blur carved into slow motion. The door rattled violently, metal screeching against metal, and then it was ripped upward, light flooding the unit and blinding me for a second. Shadows moved fast, figures stepping inside, voices barking orders. She pushed me behind her, her body a shield, her stance low and ready like a predator about to strike. I clutched her jacket, my heart thundering so loud I thought it might give us away. "Stay down," she ordered, and then she moved. I had seen her confident before, seen her dangerous, but never like this. She was fire unleashed, every movement sharp, brutal, and desperate. The knife in her hand flashed as she fought, her body twisting with a deadly grace that left the intruders stumbling, cursing, falling back. But there were too many of them, their shadows multiplying, their hands reaching. She screamed at me to run, but my legs refused. I couldn't leave her, not when the air filled with chaos and the smell of fear. One of them lunged at her, knocking her to the ground. My heart ripped apart as I saw her pinned, struggling, her knife skittering across the concrete floor. Without thinking, I moved, grabbing the nearest thing I could, a rusted metal pipe leaning against the wall. My hand shook, but rage gave me strength. I swung, the sound cracking through the unit, and the man stumbled back. She seized the opening, kicking free and scrambling to her feet, blood smeared across her cheek but her eyes blazing with fury. She grabbed my wrist, dragging me toward the door. "Now," she shouted. We ran. The night air hit my face like ice, the world spinning as shouts echoed behind us, boots pounding the ground. She pulled me through the maze of units, our breaths ragged, our hands clinging to each other like lifelines. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't let go. For a moment, I believed we might actually make it. But then headlights flared ahead of us, blinding white slicing through the dark. A van blocked the exit, doors flung open, more figures spilling out. My heart stopped. She slowed, her grip tightening painfully on my hand. I saw the decision in her eyes before she even spoke. "This is where we split." "No," I gasped, panic tearing through me. "Don't say that. Don't you dare say that." She cupped my face with both hands, her touch trembling but sure. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I love you. That's why I can't let them have you. You have to live. For me." My tears blurred everything, but I felt her kiss, soft and lingering, her lips pressing all her unspoken words into me. And then she pushed me, hard, toward the side alley. I stumbled, my body refusing, my heart screaming. "Run," she shouted, and then she turned, charging toward the headlights with a cry that shook me to my core. I wanted to go back, wanted to fight, wanted to tear the world apart to save her. But my legs carried me forward, down the alley, my sobs ragged, my breath tearing my chest open. I didn't stop until I collapsed in the shadows, my body shaking, my mind screaming her name. The night swallowed me, but the sound of her still echoed in my ears. That was the last time I saw her. Some say she was taken, others say she vanished into the dark, untouchable even in defeat. I don't know which story to believe. All I know is that she gave me the only thing she could, her love, her trust, her sacrifice. And though the world calls her a thief, I know the truth. She stole nothing from me. She gave me everything. And even now, when the nights are too quiet and the memories press too heavy, I swear I can still hear her whispering, as though she's right beside me, "Don't stop living."